I'm joined today by WBZ I-Team reporter Christina Hager to talk about the Karen Reed case. If you go by the Dedham District Court any day that there's a hearing or a reason for that case to be on the docket, you will see people outside Dedham Courthouse with signs and shirts that read "Free Karen Reed." But why? What has taken place in this case? What's it all about? We want to begin by bringing you up to speed if you haven't heard fully about the Karen Reed case. And so, Christina, let's talk first about the events. Thank you for doing this. First of all, you've been on this case from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to join you. There's so much intrigue and so many layers to this case.
Yeah, it really has become a cause celeb in New England, online and on television with every journalist in the greater Boston area. So let's just begin with the very basics and give us an outline of what happened the night the case begins.
Yeah, so in the beginning, there isn't much dispute about how this started. Go back to January 28th, 2022. There's a group of people. They're out bar hopping, if you will, going to some different establishments together. Karen Reed is in that group, her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and some other members of different law enforcement agencies and others. And they're all kind of together separately, but meeting up in different places. And then this goes into the after hours, into the morning of January 29th, and they are texting back and forth, and some of them decide to meet up at the home in Canton of another Boston police officer for sort of an after hours gathering.
Right. And so they all decide they're going to all go back to this house.
Yeah, some of them.
Some of the group peel off and continue at the house.
Right. And so this is the house in Canton on Fairview, and it's the home of another Boston police officer. And this is where the stories start to take different paths, depending on which side. So according to investigators and prosecutors, Karen Reed is driving her SUV. John O'Keefe is in the car with her. They're fighting. And
their boyfriend and girlfriend.
Their boyfriend and girlfriend. And she drops him off at the house. She decides she doesn't want to stay. And according to investigators in the case and prosecutors, she backed into him and then took off and left him in a snowbank in the driveway during a snowstorm where he would later, hours later, be found dead.
Right. This is a cold, snowy January night. And so there are already banks of snow around, and now it's snowing again. And when she's accused of backing over him and he would have fallen by the side of the road, he is in snow. And during the course of the night, of course, temperatures drop in New England. So then what is the other version of events?
Yeah, so the other version, and it's interesting because we normally don't hear these details from the defense side in a criminal case. Until much later, until it goes to trial, really.
Because her defense claims she is the victim of a vast cover-up.
Right. And this has created so much intrigue. I mean, normally defense attorneys play their cards close to the vest. They don't want to give out a lot of details. They don't want to give the other side maybe a head start as far as, what they're going to counter with, what all their evidence is. In this case, the defense attorneys took a different tactic and just put it all out there. And it has really captured the public's interest. What the defense is alleging is that once she dropped him off, he went into that home, again, a Boston police officer's home, got into some kind of fight at some point in the home. And then the defense has even brought up some evidence that a dog attack might have been involved, showing some wounds that came up in the autopsy, pictures of the victim's arm that show what they say are dog attack, dog bites, dog scratches, and that the defense is alleging that body was then brought outside and planted allegedly in that snowbank. And, to your point about the weather playing a big factor here, it kind of obscures everything. I mean, people are driving around, she then had left and driven home in a snowstorm.
Right. So there's one theory that A snowplow came along, probably pushing snow and the body further into a snowbank, which precipitated his death.
Right. According to the defense, or according to a witness, at some point she had allegedly asked, could he have been hit by a snowplow? Because in the early hours, she had called that home. She had called people they were with that night and said, he hasn't come home. I'm worried. I don't know what's going on.
She started asking. And a big part of the document production in this case are the text messages that were flying back and forth between Karen Reed, people who were in the home, others. One of the questions typed was, how long would it take to die in the cold, right? Which could be interpreted many different ways when you're either searching for someone or someone might be in the cold and you're curious how long it's going to take them to die. So there's a lot of interpretation there, but these text messages have become a big part of the case.
Right. The phone evidence is going to be key going forward. The defense has claimed that the prosecution hasn't turned over all of that evidence, and that there have been arguments about it. About that, what was typed in there, how long to die in cold. So people are assuming that was someone, and that was a Google search. So people are assuming that was someone, and this was on the phone of one of the people who was at that gathering. They know he's out there. Somehow that person would have known he was outside because Karen has now let them know she doesn't know where he is. Well, so that's what's at integral to that particular Google search. The timing is at issue. So the defense is saying that search happened before the body was reported to have been missing. So that would imply that people at that gathering were searching how long would it take for someone to die in the cold. But the prosecution has said, no, our phone IT experts have different timing. And their timing is that search came after the body was reported to have been missing, and that Karen Reed allegedly was prompting that other witness to do this search, saying, search this, see, because she's then maybe trying to figure out what exactly happened. Was it possibly him getting hit, or was it that he was out in the cold? What caused his death?
Yeah, she claims she just drove away and went home. And the people in the house maintained they just remained in the house. And did they ultimately all begin to leave and no one noticed that his body was outside?
Well, and so very early in the morning, like before 5 a.m., they get a phone call from her saying, I haven't found him. She starts calling different people saying, have you seen him? Do you know where he is? They're saying, no, we don't know. We haven't seen him.
And they must have told her he never came back in the house.
Exactly. Right. They haven't seen him all night. Well, they haven't seen him since, they parted from their earlier gatherings at the bars and different establishments.
Did she ever drive back to the house, or did she just assume he left?
At one point, she drove back because she, according to her attorneys, she's panicking and looking for him and trying to piece this together. Right. And she did go back. And that's when the prosecution says this Google search happened, that she's then talking to them, trying to figure this out and saying, hey, let's search this.
Right. Is there any indication of what she thought his state of mind was, or has she ever indicated that he might have had too much to drink? Was that a factor in her worrying that he might be walking around in the cold?
I think that there was talk of that. I think everybody involved, there was some alcohol that was imbibed that night prior on all counts. And Karen Reed herself is charged with being under the influence.
Memories are blurry.
I'm sorry?
So memories are definitely blurry.
Memories are blurry. The weather plays into this, and alcohol plays into this on the parts of everyone, on the parts of allegedly Karen Reed and the witnesses as well. And so that further blurs this whole thing.
All right. Let's start to talk about what the general public is talking about in our area, which is so much of this case and discussion about it has become a bit of a hobby for a lot of people.
Right, Paula, you mentioned how anytime you drive by the Dedham courthouse, when there's any hearing going on, you see the crowd out there with the signs, horns are honking, people are yelling.
And they're trying to say, free Karen Reed.
Right. As recently as just this week, at what would ordinarily in any other criminal case usually just be a routine pretrial hearing. These are hearings we don't get much information from. Sometimes we're not even covering them fully because we're not getting that kind of information that would be valuable.
Right. And the latest thing we should mention is that the judge in the case has designated a buffer zone around the courthouse because she wants those protesters with signage to be a certain distance back so as not to influence jurors in the case who might be coming in and out of the courthouse every day.
A lot of talk about that. The ACLU got involved in that argument. It's not the first time that a judge has established a buffer zone or set rules about, it's not uncommon to have, say, victims' families who maybe want to wear a pin with their loved one's picture on it. And the biggest concern for the judge usually is that it could influence the jury potentially.
Yeah.
So if they're walking through a mob of protesters on the way in who are, heavily promoting one side of the case, they could potentially be influenced by that. Jurors are typically told, don't watch the news, don't read any news items or anything on social media that has to do with the case that you're watching over. And so having a lot of protesters could be a problem. So the judge in that situation decided a 200-foot buffer zone around the courthouse and around the parking lot where everyone parks, which is across the street.
But I guess now we get into why would crowds of people be showing up for this case? And that leads to a man named Aiden Kerney. Explain for us who that is.
Yes. So this is the website that's become very popular called Turtle Boy. And he has done a lot of digging into witnesses, social media accounts, and promoted this theory that the defense has put out that there's a big cover up, that Karen Reed was framed. And so he's pulled out things that he has found on the internet and social media, again, done a lot of digging into this case. And people are fascinated by this. And you can see why. I mean, this whole idea that what if someone were falsely accused? What if that was you? You would want a robust defense.
And what he's put forward is kind of this cabal of police officers working together who knew actually how John O'Keefe died, deciding to frame this girlfriend in this way, and some of the timelines match up. And so this has been the evidence that he has kind of put out there online as a citizen journalist blogger. And he's put out a lot of information that a lot of the, legacy media in the Boston area has not published.
Yeah, and it's not just him. This has become a group effort, I think, on that Turtle Boy website that people are all joining in. They're so fascinated by this that they're looking themselves and checking out someone's, Facebook page or
people
Instagram,
can do a lot of sleuthing online.
Yeah, and sometimes it amounts to, hey, I was at the hair salon and I heard this about this person, and they're putting it out there. And I know we get a lot of people asking, why didn't you report this thing that I read online? And all we can say is that we just have really strict and careful policies around what we can put out there. Doesn't mean we're not paying attention to it or not looking into it. I mean, I've spent months investigating certain things that we never put out there for the public because we decide it doesn't have the context or it's not fair. We don't fully have the other side. So we really just want to, we're a CBS station, long tradition of just making sure we're being very responsible about what we put out there, providing context and thinking about the source that it comes from. Is it confirmed? Is it corroborated?
Right. And that's all part of the editorial process, which someone who is an online citizen journalist doesn't have those constraints. They can kind of say, hey, what about this theory? And what if this is true? And we should mention briefly here, he has stepped into some trouble because he's approached various witnesses in the case in person, correct?
Right. The allegations are that he has shown up at sporting events, youth sporting events, and put out personal cell phone numbers, and that, caused many of his followers to then call people, witnesses, people involved in the case in different capacities. And so, yeah, he's spent some jail time because of these accusations that he has just taken that a step too far. And we all try to get the other side and do what we can to approach people to get the other side. But the accusations are that he just took that too far to the point where he's now harassing people.
Right. So, and let's talk about, that's kind of the big explosion of interest in this case in our area. Now let's talk about why the FBI got involved.
Yeah, well, so the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, at the direction of the U.S. Attorney's Office, they'll get involved anytime they think, or they're supposed to get involved anytime they think there could be a federal crime at play. And so in this case, there were accusations that have been out there that there was conflict of interest. And it was more specifically that the lead investigator in this case, the state police trooper investigating this case, is allegedly close family friends with a lot of the witnesses in the case. In fact, the host of that gathering where the body was found outside of that home, so the homeowner. And so the prosecution has said those ties have been greatly exaggerated. This is a fishing expedition, but the defense has said this is a clear conflict of interest. This trooper should have recognized from the very beginning that he has personal ties, should have removed himself. Right. So this has been the issue that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI Boston office has been looking into, and no federal crimes have resulted from that. But there has been a lot of evidence. I mean, some would say a mountain, according to defense attorneys, a mountain of evidence, thousands of pages of documents resulting from the federal investigation that the defense say this helps our case. Prosecutors say, well, it doesn't help their case as much as they're saying.
Well, and in particular, the one piece of evidence that the federal investigators found was that there is no evidence he died in the way that the accusation reads out. Explain that.
Right. Well, and so the defense has been saying, well, let's say the prosecution has been saying that there's DNA evidence on the car that ties Karen Reed's vehicle to the victim. And the defense has been saying from the beginning, hey, we hired our own expert, our own accident reconstruction expert, and we found that the damage to the car is inconsistent with the victim, John O'Keefe's injuries. So it couldn't have been the car to do that. Now the defense attorneys are saying, hey, the federal investigators did the same thing. They hired 3 separate independent reconstruction experts to look at this, and they also found no link.
Agree with us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, again, we're getting this information from the defense attorneys, but that's what they're saying. That
this is all pre-trial
investigation.
Right.
Yeah, this is all pre-trial.
There is some PR and grandstanding that goes on in terms of setting the table pre-trial. We'll find out exactly what evidence is entered in court as the case begins. But we wanted to kind of lay out for people, this is how complex and multi-layered this case has become and in the public eye. Is there anything about covering this case that is going to be really memorable for you in terms of how different it is from other cases you've covered in the past?
Well, what's really different, the biggest difference is that we go into this knowing a lot more than we normally do about the defense side. Normally, when we cover cases from the beginning, we get the police report, we get a news release from whatever police agency is involved, and that's kind of all we have to go on, except for maybe little breadcrumbs from the defense side. In this case, it's all out there. Right. And not only is it all out there, but the public is really rallying around the defense here.
Interesting. And perhaps her attorneys introducing just enough reasonable doubt, right?
And that's all they have to do in a case. The burden of proof is on the state, is on the prosecutors. If they can put reasonable doubt out there, which they've been doing from day one. Right.
It reminds me of a smaller version of what went on during the O.J. Simpson case, where it was televised every day. People around the nation had their own theories, and it was just the early days of the internet. You can imagine what that would have been like now. But this case has really captured the imagination of a lot of people. And as you say, it does point out a case where for people who are rallying to the side of the defense, they see a woman here who they are concerned is being framed. And so they're very passionate about showing up at court, about defending her, and the prosecution is, saying you've got to wait until all the evidence is laid out.
Interesting to think about how they're going to get a jury that doesn't know anything about this.
It hasn't heard about
it's been so heavily talked about. And, you go to the store and you hear people talking about it.
Right. Just a Google search and you've got the whole thing. Well, Christina Hager, thanks so much for running down all of the headlines of this case. We know there's so much more that we could touch on, but as the trial begins, you will be there covering it for us. And we will, of course, have it daily on WBZ News and CBS News Boston, on YouTube, on our streaming channel. And it will be a really fascinating case to watch it play out. Christina, thank you.